I see a lot of younger women say, I want a 6-figure guy, I want a 7-figure guy. Love that, but I'm always interested in how you could become the 6-figure person. Leaving a very stable situation to build something of your own is very, very scary. It was giving Last Supper, it was giving Judas, I'm not gonna lie. What I could not have been able to foresee was just how catty and bitchy and emotionally draining pushing myself into the motherhood space was.
I know that there was a scandal at one point. What happened? How's your day been?
Good, easier. One kid's broken up from school, so it makes life a little bit easier. Yeah, and it's the older kid, so a lot easier.
Do you find it easier when they're broken up from school or when they're at school?
When they're at school.
Yeah.
I am looking at, because my eldest is in a fee-paying school, I'm staring down the barrel of 8 weeks. 8 weeks at a time where she's rejected summer camp. She's like, I'm too old for that.
No, you're never too old for summer camp. If I say you're going to summer camp, you're off to summer camp.
So what are you doing? I left her at home emptying out my makeup wardrobe. I was like, okay, here are the baby wipes.
Enjoy.
Put everything back when you're done.
How old is she?
8.
See, my parents decided that when we were too old for something like that, we would then go and work at them. So really, I mean, I was 8. I don't think she's yet employable.
She wanted to come with me today, but also because my kids are so young, I see work as like a break. I was like, no.
100%.
Yeah.
Which I think, I mean, we'll get onto all of this, but I think it's like so interesting when you look at women and like going back to work. I cannot imagine a time where I'd be like, yeah, I'll stay at home. I'll be like, which is really interesting because actually post-pandemic, there's been these studies done that I've talked to Nicola Kilner, who was on the podcast, and she was essentially saying that there have been studies that have been done, and obviously men are obviously really excited to go back to work because they're like, get me the fuck out of here. And then they come home and their housework's done and like all of these different things. Obviously very stereotypical, but that is the it's weighted towards that direction. And then I think of it and I'm like, yeah, I would be really excited to go to work because I get to do for me in the day and for me in the evening.
Exactly.
It's a win-win.
Exactly.
And that's why we're the men. So people can get to know you a bit. I'm sure they know exactly what you do, who you are and everything, because you are amazing and all over the internet. I would love for you to give us kind of an overview of your career from the beginning to now. All the different things. Current career, previous careers.
Oh my gosh. So I would say, to tighten it up, I got here by starting in publishing, actually just over the bridge from where we are recording. I was working in marketing for a massive publishers. I actually won a competition to get that job.
Amazing.
They launched something called The Scheme because they were trying to open up publishing to underprivileged minorities. Now that just wasn't in the racial dimension, that's also money, because publishing is notoriously white, middle class. You went to Oxford. So many of us applicants didn't have a degree. 4,000 applicants, 4 jobs. I won a job.
That is unbelievable statistics.
Here's the gag. The gag is, I don't know about the people who applied before that, but the 50 people I met when we made it to the final, I was the only black woman. So I'm not going to lie to you. I did take a look around the room and I was like, well, I better work out what days I'm working because they're trying to make this diverse. And I don't know. I do know. I know that maybe a lot of younger black people perhaps wouldn't have applied because they felt that was a door that wasn't open to them. And I completely understand that. Worked there, and what I realized, this was in 2014, my daughter was 1.5. What I realized is that advertising was moving away from magazines and everything was going online. Because the bulk of my job was calling these people called bloggers. I was calling bloggers all day. How much would you charge us to feature this book? How much would you charge us to host this book party? And I was sitting there, and when they told me what they would charge, I was like, girl, you're in the wrong job. And
Stormed out the door.
I had a little notebook, like I was actually making notes. I was like, this is the kind of platform they have. This, like, it was very strategic. In my head, I was like, you're in the wrong job and you're going to do that. Figure it out. So on the side, what I started to do was like grow my online brand. And then childcare got too much and I just had to leave. My kid, like I said, she was barely 2. And it was really hard juggling work and childcare and becoming really expensive. So I left, and in leaving, I found I could go all in on building this online dream, which was a dream, because between leaving that job and having a paid job online, it was 4.5 years.
Wow. So what were you doing in it? So your main job was the childcare at that point.
Childcare,
right?
housewife vibes.
Yeah.
My other half was going out to work. And there was a lot of, I've been open about this in books, but there was a lot of tension in our relationship because as hard as it was to supplement childcare, he was like, you leaving that job has taken us right back to ground zero in terms of money. Like we are proper struggling now. And I don't know, maybe it's the Pisces in me. I was like, we're going to make it. We're going to figure it out. Did I know that figuring it out would take 4 years? Hell no. I perhaps wouldn't have jumped out the boat. But I was like, I'm committed to this now, so why not give it a try? And I'm really, really respectful and thankful to the fact that I was with someone who did stick it out, but it was deeply uncomfortable. But I always lead with that story because I think we hear these fairy tale stories all the time. Yeah, I just grew this following overnight. I knew what I wanted to do with my brand. BS.
Yeah.
The hustle and the grind of like leaving a very stable situation to build something of your own is very, very scary.
I also think that we see a lot of the time, we notice the people who blow up really quickly.
Of course.
And I think that actually the majority of people that I've seen with longevity didn't blow up quickly. Or if they blew up quickly, it was after a sustained foundation of building like the content they like to do, all of these things. That I feel like this whole idea of like virality and especially exacerbated by like, because at the moment, I don't think, for example, for me, I don't think it becomes naturally to me to post a lot of reels. Because if I'm posting currently, it will just be like when I happen to have something to post.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm forfeiting any idea, any kind of example of like growth or whatever it might be. Whereas if you're positioning your account to grow, it's a very different like type of content, and it is very strategic, and you do have to be very strategic. And I think that it's really interesting when we see this kind of like overnight kind of success story. If we're actually going to start looking at the next 5-10 years, especially of the evolution of the content creation and influencer industry, it's going to be really, really interesting, because actually it's going to be an exception to the rule for people to have that type of longevity.
Yes.
Which I think is going to be really, really interesting to see the evolution of.
Yes. And my thing was, so I was working in publishing because I knew I wanted to write books. That was always the idea.
Right.
That was always the root of anything I've ever done. Since I was a kid, I was like, now I'm going to write stories for a living. And I've admittedly taken a very backwards path to it.
But you've done it. You've done it
I
really
did it,
well.
Did it. And what I noticed in my time at publishing was how the traditional ways of becoming published were going out the window. So it wasn't necessarily even about your talent.
No.
It was, you have this huge platform, publishing is still a business, and I was watching my publishers approach people who had no interest in writing a book and be like, oh, would you write this book? And I was like, oh, there we go. A little later down the line, say I had about 20,000 followers at the time, trying really hard to get a book deal. And I remember being told multiple times, you are such a great writer, but come back to us when you have 1 million followers.
Which is so insane, because you do like what I completely get it, and it's the same as everything now. It comes with the platform, so it's great. It's an amplifier. It's a guaranteed success. It's guaranteed it will sell X thousand copies. Fine, I get why that links to it. Like it makes complete sense why that would link to a certain advance. All of these types of things, but it feels unnecessary that that comes at the expense of legitimate authors as well.
So
like, fine if it's both.
It's so deeply saddening. I think about the books I enjoyed reading growing up, and I'm like, imagine if these people were told in this time, go and grow this following. One of my favorite new debut authors, a man called Caleb Azuma Nelson, he wrote a book called Open Waters. He recently just went platinum in the literary world, which is 100,000 plus or more sold. Barely got 10,000 followers. The work and the PR team spoke for themselves. And I'm like, so this is still a thing. This can still be done. I do believe in publishing. We've got a bit lazy. People have become a bit lazy and they just want that instant hit. But like you said, it's longevity. It's then being able to respect the person and their work. It's a bit.
Yeah, it kind of obviously depends on the, if the metrics that they're respecting and counting as success within the industry are based purely on initial sales rather than sales over time.
Yeah.
And usually that's the case because within business it's about reporting. So
Yeah.
if you can report on that quarter that X amount happened, they don't care that you'll be like, but I promise you in 2 years someone really big will read this and it'll be in Oprah's book club and all of this. Like the likelihood is that individual person doing that job is going to get more rewarded if it's a quick win, even if it's less sold down the line.
So true. So true.
So you'd left your job in publishing. You'd worked for 4.5 years unpaid as a housewife and as a blogger.
Yeah.
What came next?
What came next was me seeing this gap in the market in the motherhood blogging space. My child was very young, and what I was noticing is that the kind of content I was craving was not being delivered by me. Again, I'm not a strategic person. Well, I don't think I am, but looking back, there was a bit of strategy.
Yeah.
I was like, there is no black woman there. Cool. That's where I'm going then, because you want to put yourself in a position where you're going to stand the best chance. What I could not have been able to foresee, and if I could, I wouldn't have bothered, was just how catty and bitchy and emotionally draining pushing myself into the motherhood space was. Of all the spaces, motherhood, you'd think it'd be really kind and nurturing. No, it's like claws out at dawn. And as much as I think many of these women wanted to appear respectful of this new black face coming into this space, behind closed doors, it was a very different story.
Do you think that was perhaps because it was perceived as so they have this bubble that really works? It's this idea of the kind of like white yummy mummy, just like looks a very certain way, is almost like, even if it's very authentic, is almost like selling this lifestyle of like dream motherhood, or, you know, like here are the challenges, able to relate on this level. If that opens up to black women in the way that you were doing it, they will never be able to cater in the same way to that market, obviously. Because you can say, oh yeah, I love these nappies, but what you can't say is, oh yeah, I had this experience in childbirth, or I had, you know, I experienced this with mums in my like class, or like whatever it might be. Obviously it's experiential, and therefore that presents itself as almost like a threat to what mummy blogging had become, because that was very comfortable. And if there's an area of the industry that you're not then able to cater to, and you're catering to that, I can imagine that being quite threatening to people who didn't see it as a great thing. That maybe someone will be able to see themselves reflected in the online sphere. Yeah,
I admit that I completely bulldozed that industry. I always spoke my mind at a time when that wasn't popular, and it was deeply uncomfortable to do, because I'm just one of one. There weren't 50 other black mums behind me.
Right.
Black mums, and I've said this before, black mums, and I know there was no shade in it. They thought I was crazy. And they were like, you're so crazy for trying to disrupt this industry. It's horrible. They're all going to turn against you. Like, rightfully so, a lot of black women who tried to get into that space had their guard up. But I was like, oh, F it. I'm a little bit hell-bent sometimes. I'm like, I'm going to give it a try, whatever.
Yeah.
And they were right. It did blow up, not necessarily in my face, but that space did blow up with me at the center of certain TNT moments, because I was like, this is absolutely rubbish. Like, how are you acting like this is the only version of motherhood that exists? Again, though, looking back, it was a disruption that needed to happen. So I'm happy I stuck out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much to be said for protecting your energy and for saying, actually, of course this is the good fight, but I am not gonna have it. And like, I do think as a society we put a lot of pressure on black women to be able to be like, oh, but you go and change this because it needs to be changed. It's like, okay, but actually this is also my life, and I don't want to spend the next 5 years like fucking fighting this, when actually like,
this is like, and I'm missing out on joyful elements of my life. I'm now very much #soft life, black girl luxury, all of that. Don't want to lift a finger. But at that time when I understood how carving this career was literally make or break, I was like, there are some bullets I'm just going to have to take.
And thank fucking God you did as well, because you've now created a space, well, you've proved the concept as a whole, but you've also created a space for other people to be able to do the same.
Yeah.
And for you to have taken that, I think one of the most frustrating things I'm sure about it was you were almost forced to do activism when you almost just wanted to be like, I'm a mummy blogger. Like, I'm talking about my fucking children and sorry, I swear so much, but like, and motherhood, and you're making me be an activist.
Literally.
Like, I want to talk about nappies and the fact that I find it hard to go on holiday with my children.
Like, and I said to my husband, I'm finding myself at a point in my life and my career, especially in the UK, where I'm the first up to bat in a lot of scenarios, living in this body, looking like me. And I said to him, I'm sick and tired of being the first up to bat, dude. There is so much pressure that comes with that and so much blowback. Like, can't I be three people back? And he always says, like, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like, it's literally just your destiny. He just shrugs because he's like, you're going to complain. I'm going to go boohoo. You're still going to do it. We'll figure it out later. We know how this goes. But it just felt good to express that it's tiring.
And also have that recognition that it's not just you know, putting one foot in front of the other and making a career. If someone else who was white within that space wanted to do that, they wouldn't have had to have the emotional baggage in the same way. Of course, it would have still been hard in certain ways. But that's not to say that you literally like fighting against the grain, against the system, and against even like algorithms. What we know is promoted. Like we know that, you know, even so we talk about this a lot at Tala, for example. Different example, but we talk about the fact that we always use the same proportion of models across sizes. So we always use an extra small or small, a medium, and a large and extra large. Every single e-com shoot. It's just always what we do. Algorithmically, we post and the problem is that we won't stop regardless. But okay, so slim people are used to shopping from slim bodies. So are plus size people. They're used to being able to see like, okay, I'll work out what this will look like based on me because I always see someone who's a size 2 online. The other way around, it's not applicable. And that is what algorithms are doing, because if you're a black woman who's been used to shopping from, you know, white mummy bloggers because they say something's good, great, you're still gonna like that person's content. The other way around, because it's not represented as the quote unquote like mainstream, it's not promoted in the same way, because white women, because they haven't seen black women in the media as something that they need to be, that is just essentially normal. They literally
normal.
It won't be consumed in the same way. So it's black women's content for black women, white women's content for everyone, which is going to have a natural cap on it, which you're also just flipping all of that. Which is a big fucking thing to do.
Looking at the numbers, especially online, my audience is predominantly white. My readership is predominantly white.
But that just shows how much success you've then been able to have to go from people not even black women mainly looking at the white mummy bloggers to flip that entirely as well. Huge. It's like a huge achievement.
And it's not even something I wanted to achieve. And I think now I just use that data to be as black as possible. It's quite funny. Like the larger my white audience gets, the blacker I become. Because I'm like, oh, I'm in a position of education now. Like, I'm not going to edit or filter because I see that this audience is less black. I love black women. I am a black woman. Black women don't need to learn shit from me because they are me, you know? So if anything, I'm like, yes, white women, read this material because you are now raising the kids that I need you to educate in a certain way that is going to change certain things for my children and their children.
Again, just a big load to bear though. Like when you're like, I just want to post about my breakfast.
This is why I'm constantly looking for a holiday. I'm like, I'm very tired.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of emotional labour. So when you began that and you say that you experienced this cattiness, I know that there was a quote unquote scandal at one point where a white mummy blogger within the space was essentially found out to be posting anonymously on forums about other people within the space under a pseudonym, under an account. You were one of those people. What happened in that scenario?
This feels really funny because I feel like I've not spoken about this in this kind of way before, and it feels so far removed. I know that many people knew about what she was doing for a lot longer than I did. Maybe say 6 weeks to a month before that situation had already been brewing. Classic Candice. I never know what's happening. I'm just like, to the point that she invited me to a dinner I think it was 4 days before this scandal ended up on the cover of every newspaper. So right up until the wire, it was giving very much the Last Supper. It was giving very... it was giving... It was giving Last Supper. It was giving Judas. I'm not going to lie. I am not Jesus, but it was giving very much Judas. And I leave the dinner and I'm feeling relieved because for a long time, it felt like there was so much tension in that space and there were so many women I enjoyed seeing. Bro, a few days later, these DMs start flooding me. Have you seen what she said about you? What? Here's the thing. What are you going to say? The DMs were like, I feel like you should be the one to, considering she's spoken about you in a racist manner. You see that.
Once again, you're fighting the fight.
That girl, I deleted them DMs so quick. I said, geez, I don't want no piece of this.
Yeah.
And wherever these chips will land, so they will. The scandal broke. I think she put up this awkward story on social media.
Was it done on the Notes app?
No. It was in stories. It was a story. It was a story in the stories. I had my bloody childminder call me because, like, this is in the paper my childminder's reading, like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Like, this was a very public story. I got a WhatsApp from her that said, give me the chance to explain myself. That was the WhatsApp. Blocked immediately. Yeah. Because that is not the first message you should be hitting me with. Mm-hmm. There is no explanation around this.
That's very self-serving.
But in that moment, and here's what's really interesting, even though I'm the one being publicly and digitally accosted as a Black woman, I felt like I couldn't defend myself. Mm-hmm. So in that moment, what me and my PR team do is we always say silence can never be misquoted. I went mute. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a pip to be said. There was nothing on the internet. There were a lot of Black women with massive platforms who I'm so grateful to them because they spoke for me in a way that they knew. They even said on their podcasts, on Twitter, they were like, Candice can't speak right now. Because even if she says, oh my God, I'm so hurt, you're going to find a way to reframe that.
And then it's also 1v1, you versus them, rather than something's happened that's put me in a situation that I didn't ask to be in.
At all.
I'm now having to move my work, take time out of all of this to defend myself in a position that I didn't even put myself in.
I didn't even put myself in.
That also has much larger connotations.
Much larger connotations. The biggest connotation being, at the time, I don't know what she's doing now, but at the time, she was a registered midwife for the NHS. She was working as a midwife in a very densely populated Black area, delivering people's babies. And to know that behind the scenes, she was discussing me in a racist manner is deeply problematic. Number one, the stats. So Black women at that time, they were 5 times more likely to die in childbirth than their white counterparts. I think it's come down to 4 now. Oh, but I'm like, okay, you know, I'm like, no, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Do you know what? And guess what? In that moment, as saddened as I was like, I'm a very law of attraction, universe type gal. I did look up to the stars and I was like, yet again, I am just the subject for the teaching. As hurt as I am in my ego human self, this isn't even about me. That situation to me became a representation of the insidious racism within our health service. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even Candice versus her. It was this, on this level of minutia in this tiny social media pocket, is a grave reflection of what's going on in the outside world. Now, to this day, I've never spoken to her, wouldn't care to, but I don't know why my friends who supported me at that time think I'm crazy. I'm so empathetic. I'm just like, babe, I wish you well from afar. And I do wish you well. You had young kids at the time. They're still young. And I could only imagine if the roles were reversed, you know, the bullying that could happen at school. I'm empathetic of that scenario. Never her actions, because they're still so painful and it was so unjust. But yeah, that was...
But it's almost like you don't need to hold the hate for that for years as much as you would have every single right to. It also, I can imagine it wouldn't serve you.
It doesn't serve me. And do you know what? I'm just doing so well. Sorry.
Getting it tattooed.
Do you know what? I wish I had hair to flick, but I'm just like, I'm really thriving. And so to like live in that space,
that's all you need,
is not helpful. Also, in some respects, she did me a great favor because that scenario stripped me of shame. It stripped me of trying to pretend or play. I don't know why. I came out the other end of that and I was like, and I will never tap dance for you guys again. Now you get the content I want to deliver with me not thinking I have to appease a certain audience. Like if this is how you feel about me in real life, now you're going to get how I feel in real life. And I think up until that point, I had been so aware of the infrastructure of the mummy blogging space and the politics of social media that I played it tremendously safe. And as painful as that was, it was like watching a phoenix rise from the ashes. I look back on that situation, I'm like, Candice, girl, I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, it freed you in a way and allowed you to just be like, well, if that's what I do, if that's what I get when I'm doing fuck all, watch me rock this fucking boat. Yeah.
Exactly.
And how do you find the sphere now?
I don't.
She don't find it at all? I haven't.
I've got a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and yes, I still talk about being a mummy, but for some reason, I don't know if it's because, you know, times have changed, or maybe because my head isn't there. I don't even think a mummy blogging space exists. And I think that's really great. I think there are individual content creators that might talk about motherhood or parenting, but there is no clique. And that's really important because what was happening, whether we liked it or not, is women online were feeling like they weren't up to par with us, myself included, because if they see you always at the same events or you're always going to dinner together, it does appear that they're on the outside and this is the in thing to do. Watching that being broken down, I couldn't care less for it now. And not just in a mummy blogging space, in any space. I'm not coming to your shit fucking party. I'm not air kissing people I just don't have the energy for it. Like, am I invested in you and your brand or your message? If I'm not, Candice is not present.
Which is powerful and also probably a lot more, a lot nicer.
Peaceful. So peaceful.
So you've spoken before about originally how before you were a mother, how it wasn't necessarily something that you saw in your future. And I think this is so important online because I think that, you know, we've spoken about before actually how there's almost this kind of not just external stigma but kind of internal stigma of being like, oh, do I need to, and if I don't, do I need to know whether I do want to, kind of like all of these different things. But just being able to have like almost just not needing to have any reasoning and just being like, no, not for me now.
Yeah, my first book, I'm Not Your Baby Mother, opens with me discussing my abortion. Mad, because you picked up this book to be like, oh, Black British motherhood, and that's the first chapter. And I think that was really important because there are so many women that go on to be what we see as really great, capable mothers who made the decision not to do it at one point or another in their life. I think historically where we're at with the Roe v. Wade situation, stories like that are more important than ever. Because I tell you what's doing my nutting, and I understand the reasoning. It's the soliloquies behind that I've had an abortion story. You know, it's like, oh, you know, health, or I don't need your story. It is okay to just say, I didn't want a baby. Full stop. Put a cap on it. You don't owe anyone your truth or a sob story, your body, your choice. And so, eldest daughter syndrome, especially in the Black community, I played a very active role in raising other people. And so when it was time for me to start thinking about motherhood, I was like, God, no, I've just found freedom, like set me free. And so when I did fall pregnant the first time, there was not even a smidge in my mind. Not a smidge. What was actually very clear in my mind was how difficult it was going to be, how frustrated I was going to be. And further down the line, I had a deep feeling I would resent the person I was pregnant for, and that would overflow to my unborn child. I knew that. And I think what we see a lot now across various communities is that resentment unfolding in parental-child relationships, because maybe women were at a time where abortion wasn't even a choice. And then they've had these children, and now we're all just this clusterfuck of generational trauma because there was no one to hold that woman or even that girl's hand and say, there is another choice. And because I could see down the line about the kind of mum I would be if I made that choice at that point, not fair on me, most importantly, not fair on the kid.
And I think that when we look at it in this kind of binary way of like, do you want kids or not, this discussion of abortion, and actually you saying, I would have been a very different mother if I had had that child at that point. Whereas being able to say now, like, I really do my best. I think I'm a great mother. I'm great at my, career. I'm breadwinning, like all of these various different things. And actually, when we reduce it to this thing of like, oh, I just don't want children at the moment, or I don't want children, or I would have died if I didn't have an abortion, any of these kind of different things, it's actually just being able to be like, we know that, obviously much bigger conversation, but we know that banning abortion, for example, does not stop abortions.
And all that does, it allows us to categorize what we think is good and what we think is bad. And I hate it. It's like, okay, she would have died. That's a good choice. Oh, you just feel like you weren't ready? Bad choice. Hate that. Again, their body, their choice. Not interested. And I knew, and I'm so grateful I was in a space mentally and literally by virtue of postcode and where I was born to make that choice, because now I'm a sick mum and there is not a person in the land who can come and be like, oh, your motherhood's a bit whack. Bro, no. My daughter, at least twice a week, she's like, Mum of the Year award. Like, she just runs into my office and shouts that and kisses me and runs out. I'm like, no, I really rock this because I was committed to it, you know?
Yeah, and because you've been allowed to do that in your own time and your own space and the way you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really powerful. And when you decided then to have children, how did that kind of, was there a change in your head in that time? Was it kind of a, do you know what? Yeah.
Do you know, the biggest change was the guy. It was the guy. For all intents and purposes, because I'm a massive TikTok fan and I know this is a big discussion when women hit a certain age. They're like, I like this guy, but he has a kid. And I viewed that as a positive. So I'm a stepmom to a 14-year-old. My husband has a daughter who was born before we got together. And when I saw how he was with her, I was like, yes, golden ticket. Thank you. Yes, please. It was a great example of what he could be to the idea of my future kids. And I feel really lucky again that I was able to have that example, because I know there are so many women who, for one reason or another, no woman, in my opinion, has children with a man who they think is going to F them over. So I hate even that discussion where it's like, oh, you should have known better. No one steps up to that plate thinking that this guy's going to cheat or be abusive, or that's never the thing. So I feel like I just got lucky at being able to foresee the kind of guy I was having the kid with, because I always knew I'd be a working mum. Like,
yeah,
I wasn't just going to mum. And just mumming is great. Guess what? Just mumming is hard.
Yeah.
It's harder than being a working mum.
I would want to work. to not
to leave them. I'm like, I've got to go work now. I knew that I wanted to still build a massive empire and fulfill all my dreams. And what was going to make the difference in that is the literal partner.
Absolutely. And also knowing exactly what you want out of life, and you want to build this empire, you want to have your dreams, all of these different things, that almost, I can imagine, allows you to be a better mother. Because if you're feeling constantly resentful in any way, whether it's because of partner, whether it's because of situation, whether it's because of any of these things, but feeling kind of partially resentful of the fact that either you don't know your dreams or you're not pursuing them in some way, that can be hugely harmful to a child as well.
So harmful. And I'm able to now, like, not just divvy up my time, but be honest with my kids about where my time is. 4-year-old doesn't care so much. My 8-year-old is extremely active in my calendar, right? It says you're going out at 1, where are you going? Esme, you're going to be at school. It doesn't matter. Doesn't care. Why are you going there? What time And it allows me to be like, that's mummy time. That's me going to work. That's me feeling fulfilled. And I hope, especially with my daughter, that allows her to make a note in her mind and be like, right, if I decide to have kids, I can divvy up my calendar. I can be honest and say, that's not an us thing. That's a her thing. Like, she wanted to come with me to work today. After this, I think I'm going to have quite a boozy lunch. I was like,
that's not for you.
Adult time. She was like, I get it. I love you. That's important for her to see as well. So yeah.
And I think I love, again, it's on TikTok, but I love seeing those things where it's essentially understanding the other way as well, and being like, you can have your time too as a child, and you are empowered to have that, like that. Of course, you don't want me to come along to your play date. Like that is your time too, and you get to ring fence off your own time, and you get to have those boundaries, which I think is a conversation that's only really shot up in the past few years, of being like, kids can have boundaries too, and allow themselves to just be like, actually, this is my space.
Yeah, and she needs it, and I appreciate that, and I hope me doing that for myself encourages her to do it. She does that so well though, because we just moved house, and she lives on the top floor by herself. She's very good at like, I'm going to my apartment, don't call me. Like that's literally her.
She is living my dream life.
Bye.
And what type of life do you want for your kids that you've kind of that your work is opening them up to?
Guys, don't shoot me for this, but this is a very important conversation. Nepotism, especially in the Black community. I want my kids to be like, don't you know who my mum is? I feel like other communities have had such headway in doing that, or being like, I don't know, mum, I want to spend the summer at Vogue. Can you help with that? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like getting them places a little bit quicker is really important to me.
Well, because it's not about, I think the thing is with white nepotism, which is pretty much the majority of nepotism, it's kind of, that's about skewing the playing fields, like, for people who are listening on audio, but from one level to another. Whereas that playing field's already like that. So it's about heightening that gap. Whereas with that building generational, and I see in Black communities a lot online speaking about building generational wealth and building that idea of kind of nepotism from that idea. It's, rather than thinking of it as unleveling the playing field again, think of it in terms of, if you think of all the systemic kind of challenges in terms of getting there, it's more like leveling the playing field than it is like
throwing it out of balance,
creating that disparity.
It's literally like creating a way to play catch up. And so for them to be like, do you know who my mum is? Can you help with that? That for me, biggest vibe. That's always, every decision I make, I do try and think 20 years ahead, and I'm like, is this going to be helpful to them going here or being, I'm always thinking like that.
And you've spoken openly as well about kind of the idea of being the breadwinner, and that not necessarily, I mean, we all know necessarily that that's not kind of what's seen as the norm with women, or the traditional, you know, things like the primary caregiver, all of these various different things that we have clear stereotypes of. What do you think that that's kind of had a big impact on your children in terms of the way they see you as a woman and your career?
Definitely. My husband makes a point of always, you know, when my daughter or my son asks for something, he's like, I've got to speak to mum. And my daughter the other day was like, Dad, can I ask you a question? She said, and this is really interesting given the situation we've raised her in, she said, you're the man of the house. Why do you always consult mum? Like, you're a big man, make your own decisions. And he was like, whoa. This is so out of balance with what we've been trying to teach you. But it shows how like all consuming outside media is, or discussions she may be having with her friends. And he was like, honey, in this house, you know, what your mum says is really important and really valued. And so she was like, right, get it. And in terms of being the breadwinner, and this is another conversation I've been dying to have. Again, TikTok has got all these things flowing in my mind. I see a lot of younger women saying their mid-20s, I want a 6-figure guy, I want a 7-figure guy. Love that, know your worth, want a guy who's doing A, B, or C, but I'm always interested in how you could become the 6-figure person. Life is short, but it can also be really long, and things are always changing. For a long portion of time, for those 4 or 5 years, my husband was the breadwinner. No one batted an eyelid at that because that's the norm, that's the societal norm. And then in the middle of the pandemic, he left a job that was literally draining his soul. And I became the breadwinner. We just don't see it like that in our household. This pot has got to get filled up anyhow. Don't care who's doing the filling. This is what the house needs. Who's dumping into this reserve? Also, at this time where I'm being the breadwinner, I'm already thinking 5 years down the line where I may want to take a career break. And now he's going to have to step in. So I just find the breadwinning conversation really interesting, because in our house, it's just a flip-flop. It's like, what if please God, no. But what if I have another kid? I just want to make sure the atmosphere is understanding. I'm just using that as an example. What if do you know what I mean? There are going to be some things I can't do, and I'm going to have to pass the thing back to him. So it's been really good, I would say, for my confidence. I can't lie. It allows me to know that, or believe that outside of our union, I can survive. And that's really important for all women, specifically Black women and I think a lot of our older aunties, as we call them in the community, they still struggle with this. They're stuck in relationships they can't leave because they believe they can't be financially free. So to know that I can pour into my household in a way that is usually expected of men fills me with a lot of confidence. I love him to death, but if things ever went wrong, or God forbid, because this is happening to a lot of women I love right now, he dies, I'm not going to be sitting here thinking, well, not only is my emotional world rocked, but the way I live day to day is rocked. I'm like, no, I can do this. I can manage.
And it's a big thing for women as well. I think that in general, the idea of financial independence as almost just creating your freedom in a way that it's not going to create complete freedom. You can still want someone who does X, Y, and Z. But I do think there's this kind of slight danger in the conversation. And of course, from like my position, my career started very young. I've come from a big position of privilege, like in terms of that I can't, shout from the rooftops like, just be financially fluent, then you won't need of course I can't. But in terms of actually this glamorization of, I want a man who does X, Y, and Z, and it almost just kind of flipping the conversation again, that kind of worries me. And it's like, yes, know your worth, know what you want from a man, 100%, but please, more so than that, know what you want from yourself.
Also, I've been with really rich men, really rich, horrible men, and
stingy.
They're so stingy, and they see women like that as so interchangeable. It's like buying a new pair of trainers, because they know you are dependent upon them in that manner. And I would much rather a hardworking 5-figure guy who is going to exalt me to a place where I get to be an 8-figure gal than the 6 or 7-figure guy who is always going to try and oppress me.
Well, it just also, I think, always creates a power imbalance, because no matter what that, if that difference is large in some way, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, and there'll be relationships that really do work in it and all of that, but actually from certain kind of like friends I've seen, for example, when that has been quite a different weighting, if you have an argument and you're on a holiday, that the kind of like I don't want to be in the situation where it's like, I can't tell you not to do something or ask you not to X, Y, and Z, or have an argument and it not be already weighted based on the fact that you paid for this holiday or this dinner.
In my second book, Sister, I talk about this really well. In the Black community, well, in my house, we used to call it GVM, your get Bex money.
Yeah.
Are you in a position to get Bex? Do you have enough money to be angry and back your chat? Because, like you said, you could be on holiday where you're like, I don't really want him looking at other girls. You don't have your GVM, so you feel like you can't say that. Because how are you getting home if he's gonna be like, and there's a lot of them that will, well, if you don't like it, leave.
I also worry that it's making young men like broke to keep up with the whole thing.
It's so funny. It's not funny, it's the way you say it. Like broke.
I'm worried that they're, but I'm just like worried, like when we create this ideal that like you have to be, sorry, this is so off topic from everything we've ever talked about, but I think it's really interesting. When we create this ideal that it's like, oh, you're fucking 21, and it's like, he has to take me to Novikov on the first date. And it's like, you're not making him spend his rent money.
So broke, so unsustainable. Also then, I think it doesn't encourage young men to double down on the things that, and you will need this if you decide to have kids, you might just want a man who is going to help you change your sanitary towel. On God. In that moment, what's in his bank balance doesn't matter. Is he emotionally mature enough to deal with the realities of helping you become a parent, or supporting himself in becoming, do you know what I mean? There's just it's such a cliche. And I know people listening are going to be like, it's because you're rich enough to say that. But there are literally some things money can't buy.
I do worry about the role of social media. I think it's really interesting, like the way social media talks about dating and talks about building yourself up for your future and asking for things from people. I think it's really, really important to know what you want from dating and all of those things. But I do also like worry about the repercussions it has. And for young. Do you find that as well as people following you from, I know the answer to this, I know lots of different, I follow you, I know lots of different types of people follow you. Do a lot of young women, do you think, follow you in terms of like the kind of lifestyle and who you are? And
especially on TikTok, when I run into TikTok followers on the street, they're all barely 25. I love them, but you can smell the SMA on them. I'm like, you guys are so young. And some of them will literally be like, Auntie Candice, I'll be like, oh my God. And I just, every other story or video or book, I try to remind people that this is still an edited, curated life. I'm always going to give you the good with the bad. You see, so many people are like, Black love, couple goals. I'm like, and he wasn't making six figures. And we were really broke. Do you know, like, don't just fall into this idea of this ideal lifestyle. There is so much that has had to happen to get to this point, and allow that to happen. 26, I just had Esme. We were literally choosing between topping up the gas meter and nappies, no word of a lie. And I knew what I wanted, but I just didn't know how I was going to get there. That's the reality of most 20-somethings. I don't want them coming to my page and I'm almost 35 and them thinking, oh, you know, I need to play catch up, or what has she got right that I'm not doing? Girl, I've been doing a whole heap of nothing. And actually, when, you know, there used to be this book, I'm really showing my age now, there used to be this show called This Is Your Life, where this guy used to give you a massive red book and he'd like go through the monumental moments of your life. There are totally gonna be more pitfalls and tears than triumphs and like, ooh, ooh, you know what I mean? I just don't think we get to see that. So I'm always trying to be as real as possible so that I'm not like leading people down this garden path.
Yeah, and how do you manage to do that whilst also keeping your boundaries? So kind of keeping this transparency and showing people the realistic kind of life online?
Living and learning, always a lesson. So with this house, there have been so many cries for a house tour. And I made a video the other day, I was like, babes, back up. Like Candice 5 years ago would have done that because I existed in my ego and I wasn't yet in therapy and I would have needed outside validation for this achievement. And that would have been house tour, the likes, the dopamine. Oh, you've done so well, congrats.
Yeah, I promised mine 4 years ago.
Bro. Never do it. And I was like, guys, it's never coming. I shoot content from my house. You're gonna see bits and bobs, but that desire to have strangers tell me I've done a good job, it's just left the chat, you know? And so it's creating those boundaries as I go. The way I would have shared or spoke about my kids 5 years ago, it's left the chat. Esme is old enough to be like, don't put your phone down. Put your phone down. And I have to be respectful of that. And it's living and learning. There are things I wished I'd never shared. There are things I wished I had shared more, because there's even that. But it's just, you know, it's about every day waking up and being like, no, I just don't feel like doing that.
And what do you see your future looking like in terms of your career? What's the big goal? What's the...
God, the big goal? The big goal is always freedom and flexibility. So to be able to not be stuck in one place. I'm massive on traveling. To be able to employ girls that look like me, that's such a big vibe. I'm always like trying to look for really hungry young Black people. And to just be free creatively as well. And to be free of, and this takes time, but to be free of the algorithm. The people I look up to have changed over the years. None of them are quote unquote famous. They're like a really great VC person or an investor no one's heard of. That's kind of where I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be the bougie auntie you can't recognize.
Love that. She's going to disappear one day. Like, where's she gone? She's going to be
I keep saying this. When you guys see the socials crumble, I've made it.
Yeah.
When you go looking for me.
There's nothing wrong. It's the opposite.
Everything's right.
I'm so good that I have decided
that part.
Yeah, it is the more and more I talk to people who've been online for a long time as well, I think it's really interesting to see that, like, I've kind of said this before, but the evolution of it, and actually looking at like, no one's going to want to be online for 20 years.
For 20 years.
Whereas a normal career is 40 years,
Do you know what I mean?
45 years. So where are they going?
When I am stable enough to delete all socials, please know, guys, that Auntie Candice is doing very, very well.
She's good. She's fine. She's more than fine. Don't go looking for her.
Don't.
And I think that is a perfect place to stop. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I feel like this has been cathartic.
It's been very, I knew we wouldn't stick to one thing. It's been very all over the place. But
yeah,
hopefully...
like give you a brief at the beginning of the episode, be like, oh, these could be the topics. And we're like, fuck it. Who needs that? But thank you so much. You've been fantastic.
It's been great.